Let's begin with some comfortable, quiet sitting. Get into this settled posture. And Steph, you haven't been here, but we've been chatting about the different aspects of Chinese medicine, not really channels, not meridians the way we normally think of them, but famous areas on the body that we want to make sure are open and harmonized. A couple of days ago, we worked on the central channel, which runs from, through the center of the body, penetrates right down through the middle, the Chongmai. Yesterday, we emphasized the one that's associated with the back, with the spine. It's not the spine, but it's associated with that aspect of the body. And today we're going to emphasize the one that runs down the front line of the body, which is particularly useful during pregnancy. It's called the conception vessel. Well, it's called the renmai, and often translated as conception. And so as you sit, we first establish that sense of that central penetrating vessel, that we settle through our center line as our body releases and relaxes down, and the tissues settle down toward the ground or to the seat. It allows this central alignment that's running through the middle to express its fullness. And that often shows up as this sense of release and lengthening upward. So the more you soften downward, the more there's this sense of freedom and expression, fullness upward. This is us getting out of the way of this aspect of our physiology. These particular deeper vessels, they're not really channels. They're more associated with just the way we are, the way our bodies form themselves, the way we are shaped as people. And similarly, once we have that weight resting on the backs of the legs, the tailbone is free. Hopefully our spine is no longer compressed or tight. And that allows us to then have our spine free. We're not resting our weight in our back. Our spine is free to move because the weight is resting through the center of the body. So if you're sitting on your tailbone or that you have a sense of pressure in your spine, you want to release that as well. So again, because of that central channel allowing us to be long and free, that also helps to free up the spine, which softens the back of our neck, allows the crown of the head to continue releasing upward. They're all part of the same functionality of the body. And as the neck and shoulders are soft, the throat, the jaw, the area around the eyes also all release. That freedom in the neck increases. The mind becomes more clear. The body softens further. And once that quality of being supported and released upward and outward is found, then notice this sense of spaciousness in the middle because there's this lengthening. More space is happening in the center. The bottom is going down, the top is going up, and so there's more room in the middle. And in that space, we allow our chest to release, our solar plexus and our belly to soften. There's this sense of it releasing down toward the space behind the navel. Not because you're doing anything with it. That is not what these are for. You are simply freeing it to be how it is. And of course, softening the hips, the legs, and the feet. A couple of more minutes. With every exhalation, the body is a bit softer. With every inhalation, more still. Another few breaths. Continuing to soften your shoulders, releasing them down. Make sure that you're not compressing your neck. You're simply stimulating this point at the top of the head. As you reach toward the back of the head, recognizing that the process for today is to continue softening the chest, to continue releasing your belly, so that as you reach back, try not to lean back or tighten your shoulders or grip. Everything stays soft, open. As your elbow comes up and your hand reaches back, continue to let your shoulder blades sink down your back. Your chest softens as your arm releases. The more you can soften your shoulder and your shoulder blade, the easier all of this becomes. Emphasizing the warming of that point, the base of the neck. Your awareness soaking into the space beneath the skin. So loud as it echoes across the mountains there.
It is. Hopefully it's not picking up.
Yeah. One of the interesting things about living in the woods is from time to time hearing hunters out in the middle of the forest. The gunshots echo up and down the mountain here. It's very sad. I'm not a fan of killing my neighbors. Let the warmth of the palms soak into the space around the eyes, behind the eyes. Del, welcome. Nice to have you. If you can, scroll back and watch the beginning of the video so that you can learn about what we're doing today. And as usual, for the people who are joining us from across the world that have never been here before and aren't sure about what we're doing, please check down below in the comment section for a link to an introductory video that explains what we're doing and how to do the form. And that way you can join us in these live sessions and not feel so lost. Cultivating that sense of comfort and ease, friendliness. Slow yourself down if you find yourself feeling frantic, pushing hard and trying to force changes. Instead, emphasize the cultivation of quiet compassion, slowing down your nervous system. feeling for the appropriate depth. You can push too hard and squish everything against the bone and actually inhibit circulation. You can push too light, so all that you do is rub the outside of your skin. Or you can sink in just deeply enough so that you're nourishing and helping to move and warm that space just beneath the skin where all the activity is happening. Remember that we are using this as a kind of somatic meditation. We're using the activity and the connection with the body and the physical experience of the body as a way to center and settle the mind. Kind and gentle, easy. As your mind wanders away, as you soften it, it comes back to this experience. Keeps you grounded in the present moment. Keep the weight settled appropriately. That way you're able to take the weight off of your spine and to soften the front of your body. It hangs rather than collapses. spend extra time softening the base of the throat, relaxing the base of your tongue, below the clavicle. All of this is soft. The chest releases. Solar plexus, the belly, everything sinks down. Waiting for that sense of fullness or warmth, a sense of settling. Perhaps your emotions become quieter, your mind settles into the present moment, your body might suddenly soften, or often you hear people who have been breathing shallowly suddenly take a deep breath as everything releases down. However it shows in for you and your body, do wait until some kind of marker of an adjustment happens before moving on. Sometimes it can take several minutes, sometimes it comes quickly, but always take your time. So today we're talking about this conception vessel that runs. It doesn't really run through. It takes part in the front creation of our body. And part of the way that we engage with it is through making space, as I was talking about in the beginning, about appropriate posture and allowing things to open so that this can hang and release effectively. One of the ways that we open and hang things, I'm going to assume that most of you already took the class where we talked about the throat and the jaw and the neck and releasing all of that in the position of the tongue. So in the way that when I soften my jaw hangs down. It doesn't just hinge open this way, but a soft jaw also lengthens this way, down from the jaw slightly. Space opens in this direction. It also opens this way, forward as it softens. The joint releases in that direction as all of this tissue softens. It's easy for the tip of the tongue to kind of float upward toward the roof of the mouth. And it can touch the space in the center of the mouth, on the hard, just behind the hard palate. But what you don't want is to connect to that point by pulling your tongue back and pushing it against the roof of your mouth. That causes stagnation and tension in the place that you want it to be free. And it would actually make it worse instead of better. And so what we want to do is learn how to create openness and softness through the tongue so that it naturally wants to open back. The way a baby, when it's born, it has its tongue against the roof of the mouth. Sometimes your doctor will reach in and pull the tongue free from the roof of the mouth. It's that kind of position. But it happens not through doing, but through a releasing and making space so the tongue moves in that direction automatically. So please let me know if that doesn't make sense, because this is a common misconception in Qigong. And this helps to restore this connection that we have through the body. Different kinds of connections that happen through the skin, through the structure and the function of the body we are restoring by releasing into an appropriate shape and an open kind of constitutional change through the body. And these deep vessels are part of that constitutional shift. It's not a thing that we do something with. That's a misunderstanding. It's not a channel the way we work with other channels. These are deeper aspects of how we are growing our body. And so this conception vessel, this deep reservoir here, often relates to the yin functions of the body. Not all the time, but literally conception, literally pregnancy in people that can carry children. This is one of those places that has a really big impact. And very often you'll actually see on pregnant people, this whole line becomes red and darker color as it fills with blood and qi. This is the statement about it, as things open and swell. And so we want to relate with this channel through, as I was mentioning, a release and lengthening upward, especially in this position that we're in, so that all of this can be free. The same thing happens with our breath and everything else that needs to sink down in the body. And so let's go ahead and move through the shoulders and the arms. And as we do, please be careful to avoid lifting your shoulders and your chest or tightening or holding your breath, because this is what we're emphasizing opening today. And for those of you who are experiencing different kinds of body shapes and different things going on, who probably have a much deeper understanding of the conception vessel than I do at this point, feel free to share your experience with us if you'd like. And remember, these are not male, female things, or even masculine, feminine things. They're simply aspects of our physical experience. So everybody should soften and release and nourish these areas. It's very important. Crown of the head is released upward as you soften your shoulders and your neck. Emphasizing that quality of nurturing and nourishing, settling and warming. And remember that you can lay or sit in any way that feels comfortable to you for your body at this moment. You can rest your arm on your belly if that's helpful. Whatever it is that helps you to soften. Easing the body open. I've been discussing in the last couple of classes about how these 8 extraordinary vessels, we don't really have points for them. They're not channels in the way the other ones are, but we do have points that help to relate to them, that resonate with them, that help to activate that aspect of our nature, to help to heal them if there's imbalances, congenital imbalances, these kinds of things. We try not to draw on them since they're more like deep reservoirs in our nature. And one of the really important points that relates to this renmai is here. One of the points that we've actually been working for the people who tend to have a sore thumb. Lung 7, broken sequence. It's an image of lightning. It's just up here on the top of the bone on this other side of this wrist bump here in this area. So as we soften that point, this relates to often pain in the thumb, which is why partially we spend time working with it. But in this case, as we spend time warming that point, continue to soften your chest, your belly, because this relates to this line here in the front. The generation of this quality of our nature. You take your time. Since most of you by this point already know the form, and I hope you appreciate how far you've come. We're almost halfway through the entire 100-day sequence.
That's right, yeah.
Today's 44?
44, I think.
Yeah, gosh, amazing. And I know that not all of you have done every day, but you can always go back and do more and catch up with what you learned. That's one of the reasons it's nice to have it online and do it into the future. But you do want this steady input, asking your body to change. And you don't have to do the full set. You do the areas that seem to speak to you the most at that time. Just in case you are very, very busy and you only have maybe 20 minutes or something, then just do an area that seems especially needful so that your body continues to get that input to change, to release, to open. Otherwise, it's easy to fall back into the old habit patterns. Dell is asking about what our next 100-day program will be.
Yeah, it's a good question, Del. I've been kind of wondering the same.
Well, we still have a couple months to think about it. So for those of you who are listening that have input, feel free to share. I don't promise to take your input right away, at least. But because I also have to choose classes that are safe to teach in the online format to people that may just show up that have no knowledge of what we're doing. That's part of this new gig of teaching online.
I would be curious to hear what suggestions people have. If there's a particular practice they think would, be a nice follow-up to this.
I think so. Probably in about a month or a month and a half, I'll put out a little questionnaire and people can vote on various options. Dell says, standing posture. Yeah, that's that thing, Del. So you get somebody who comes in and we go, okay, we're going to do half an hour of standing posture or something. And for them, 5 minutes is a lot, but they see us standing there. And so they keep standing there, and the pressure builds in their ankles and their blood stops flowing in their legs. And so these deeper skills of learning how to soften and not harden, because most people stand and they harden instead of release. And so standing posture is foundational and amazing, but only as long as it continues to allow us to open and become more porous and more free. But in my experience, at least, even how I used to train myself from the masters that I had studied with at that time, the practices just lead you into being more and more stiff, more and more hardened, developing the wrong kind of strength.
It seems like a class like this would be a good prerequisite to standing, because we're learning how to soften and to listen, so that, you know, if we do stand, we recognize when it's time to stop.
That's right.
As that tension builds.
That's right. That's why I've been trying to teach all these classes on my Snake and Turtle channel as a curriculum. You'll see that I have numbers and a sequence that I want people to go through. I know that most people aren't doing that. They sort of jump around and watch what they want. But I do it that way because I need to establish vocabulary. We need to learn important principles of letting go and what does that mean. And because usually it's not, or maybe almost always, it's not what people imagine it is. And so I have to take people through those steps, but most people don't want to do that. They just want to do a form and not have to think about it. And so we have to balance all of those different qualities from various levels of skill and people who aren't willing to do the homework, so to speak.
Steph says, a mother and baby Qigong set. I love that.
That's a good idea.
We will absolutely have to think of something.
I know that they exist. It's not something I've ever taught, so that might be fun. But maybe we can interview somebody that specializes in that. That would be a very good idea. Tomorrow I'm interviewing another Qigong instructor who studies with Master ZhiCheng, the guy who first pointed me toward studying Snake and Turtle years and years ago. His wife has had a couple of children and is a Qigong practitioner and Chinese medicine person as well. So maybe I'll ask her what her favorite set is and how she best connects.
We have a question. Where can we watch the interview?
It'll just show up on my channel, the Snake and Turtle channel. It'll show up on, everything shows up on Patreon. And then a certain percentage of that shows up on YouTube. But this one will go out on YouTube. I'm not entirely sure what we'll talk about yet. But Steph, maybe I can get his wife involved and ask questions about that as well. So that's a really good question. Cranky hips.
Yeah, like I was telling you yesterday, my hips are starting to feel a little.
It's really amazing.
Softer now.
This set it's so simple. I think it's deceptive. It feels like not a lot's happening, but as long as you continue at it and you allow the softness to collect. That's the way in Chinese, actually, and Shifu talks about it, that the softness, what's the word he uses? It collects in the tissues. Softness gathers over time, like it continues to absorb and increase, and it turns into something else. So you just continue to give the input of softness, and the tissues continue to open, and it's only tiny bits at a time. So we keep putting the input in.
Can you hear my stomach?
It's louder than the hunter's gunshots. Last night I stayed up and made a giant pile of Mel's favorite foods. Filled the fridge with them. It was fun.
It was like Christmas morning as a kid.
So again, lung 7 here. Just up from the thumb on the top of the wrist. It's kind of over the bone. It's behind that bump on the wrist. It's a bit hard to find with your fingers, so you just soften that area. Again, we're not trying to do acupressure in the sense of finding a single point, but rather we're working in broad areas here. But releasing and understanding this point while emphasizing this softening down, releasing down. Continuing to soften your jaw, releasing your tongue. Chest be empty, to sink down, chi flows down to the belly. As always, just letting the breath do what it wants, simply removing restrictions. The breath should be continuously transforming.
I know you love this part so much.
I do.
I wish you could see everybody else doing it too.
Remember, as your hand goes up, your elbow comes up, the shoulder sinks down. Shoulder sinks down, your chest is released. And very importantly, these closing movements, they release all of this down through the center line, along the front line of the body, letting your awareness soak in. In this case today, letting your emphasis be here in the navel. Or again, if it's a difficult time for you menstrually, and you feel like this is making your menstrual period heavier, then you can place your awareness here at the solar plexus instead. Feeling your awareness collect like softness in this space. Softness gathers as a quality. Have you ever seen chemical electroplating?
No, I'm not sure what that is.
If I took anything, I've seen people do this with a rose, for instance. I take a rose and I dip it in a solution. I just turn it upside down, put it in solution. And there is, let's say, gold or some metal in there. And basically I create an ionic change, a charge. And so it slowly begins to draw these tiny molecules of gold and to coat at a very, very molecular thin layer the surface of the rose. Wow. Until you pull it out and you have a golden rose. And it replaces it. And people do this with bumpers, and they do it with all kinds. You can do it with coins, that kind of thing. And I feel like often that, like in my mind, that's kind of what is happening here. We are just resting in this space, and by creating a place, it's like us dipping ourselves in that solution. And slowly this accumulation of these qualities grows. Softness, qi gathers, health changes, and the nature of our cells and all of the herbs and spices in our bodies begin to transform. And it's so slow, you'd have to have a time-lapse camera for us over the course of months to experience and notice the difference. But from the inside, I like to imagine this subtle change happening over time. Did you see that it was snowing a little earlier?
No way.
Yeah, I was out there looking at the window, talking to Nate, and it started snowing. I'm like, what is going on?
I forgot it was supposed to snow, and tomorrow as well, I think.
Thank you, Del. You're very kind. I'm just happy to get to share with anybody. These methods have changed my life. And I feel like it's literally a promise that I made. I became a lineage holder and I was discipling.
I was trying not to grip my hips while I walked.
Okay. I was walking like a strange animal. And so I've literally promised to share these things with the world. And if I can share them with one person who takes it seriously and transforms, then that's a way of changing the world and spreading these teachings around. And that's all that matters to me. Literally, in my mind, if one person is helped, then that's enough. And so, of course, it would be nice if other people learned how to be peaceful and kind and took the time to be still and quiet and soft and friendly with themselves and each other. I think it's a pretty useful change to make in the world, in my imagination. So I appreciate that you all are joining me in taking the time to transform, because it does take time. So let's spend some time here, softening down the sternum. The sense of warmth and sinking down. We're not trying to push qi down. It's not like with the channels where we're trying to help blood flow circulate or something like that. In this case, we're allowing this emphasis of warmth and release to come down all the way from the throat notch here, sternoclavicular notch. So many fun names on the body. They're just descriptions of where they are, but they sound really cool in Latin. I'm convinced that's half of what medicine is about, making things sound impressive. And as well, let's release again the way we did when we were working with the breast tissue, away from the center, just to soften these lines here that grip and hold and tighten toward the sternum, because everything is attaching here. So we want to very gently nourish them open. You can use your fingertips. I'm just doing this as a way to show where we are, tracing those lines between the ribs, but you can also do one side at a time if that's helpful and feels good. You can try both sides at a time. But we want to release and relieve all of these adhesions, spaces of stress. And especially if you have heavy breast tissue, this area tends to become kind of traumatized, because the body is such a funny design, and it's just these heavy weights resting. They're only being held by these thin layers of soft tissue and connective tissue. So we want to be easy and open. And then softening a little bit further down the space of the solar plexus. If I use my fingertips, it's here. Just And that V, that line of the ribs here, right in the center there, right at the unicorn's hoof. And today it feels really nice to use the center of my palm. But you use whatever part of your hands or somebody else's hands if you like. Gently opening these spaces, being kind. Especially here along this channel and in this area, being friendly, attentive, listening to yourself. How is your body responding? What messages is it giving you? Feel into this space. One direction then the other. And then a bit further down, between the navel and that last point. We're in 12. Softening your breath in this space. And again, just as a reminder, that does not mean try to push your breath into these places. Instead, if you make space by softening things open, the breath flows wherever it needs to naturally. I bet that people are noticing a theme. Hopefully. There are all kinds of amazing skills and techniques and things to learn within these practices, the internal arts. But the very first thing to do is just to get our bodies restored, our minds and our emotions settled and restored. That has to happen first before people try to do new things. We become present. We become friendly and kind to ourselves, to other people. Our minds are no longer running around. We're not exhausted anymore. Our bodies restore their natural forms of strength and balance and poise. Not because we're doing anything special, but because we stop doing things that are harmful. And then from that center point that we were just working on, come out toward your ribs. Just on the other side of this abdominal line here. I don't know how much it shows up through my shirt. Just before the ribs, in line with that point, softening those 2 points. Stomach 21. But really this whole area beneath this section of the ribs. Easing that open. Let's see. Yeah, for me, the center of the palm still feels really nice, even though it's a little bit awkward. And again, I don't know why it feels good. I'm just listening to my body. And that message is important as well to share. Sometimes the answer is just because. Both directions. It's that primary answer that parents give their kids. Why? Just because. Easing this space open. When you feel like this energy is spreading and moving, then we begin to soften through. You've created a space through which now, as we release this more potent energetic that often gets trapped in the rib side, it now has a place through which it to move. This is a general rule in medicine, really in life, but if I use a medical example, Maybe I'll use an agricultural example. If I have an obstructed water channel on my farm, and I release the water that's been building up for days, it's very important that I have prepared a place for that water to go to. Otherwise, it just creates another mess. And the body, if I'm going to release an obstruction, it's very important that I have a place for that obstruction to go through to release through, so that it's not just trapped in the next place, which makes things worse. Easing open. The same thing is true emotionally in relationships. If I'm going to release something or express something, it has to have a place to go through. Otherwise, it's just like shouting at a brick wall or creating another blockage. You have to be able to make a way through for somebody. Right?
That's right.
Right now, we're in the midst of experiencing a lot of loved ones that believe very strange or dangerous or even hateful things. And we have the experience of what happens if you just say, oh, you're wrong. Or you just get into a fight over this disagreement, whatever that is, this point of contention. And what happens? Nothing happens. It just creates a bigger blockage. You just exploded into another blockage. And now things are worse because now it's a new experience that nobody's used to. But what if instead you've prepared the ground the way that I would on a farm for that big rush of water and energy and flow, so it has a place to go? What if we've talked about something different first? We've talked about our values. We talked about our connection. We established a relationship. Maybe we even set up rules for the discussion, so that when these feelings come out and things are discussed, they have a place to go that doesn't just wreck the relationship. It's the same functional experience in our body. It's the same in our mind as we heal trauma and memories. We have to prepare the way. And so for these Qigong practices that people do where they just force releases, or you go to a doctor and they force a giant pop, or they push a whole bunch of energy into an area, it fixes one spot but usually creates a catastrophe just up the road. First, prepare the way. First, be somebody and something that is capable of change and change in the right direction. Then release the energy. This is my soapbox. Allowing your awareness today to settle into the space within the navel, just behind. Yesterday, we emphasized allowing our awareness to gather at the Mingmen on the spine. And normally we're in between the two. But today, nourishing this this vessel in particular. Swallowed wrong. Melanie is sitting comfortably on her amazing stool over there.
Very, very comfortable stool. Gifted by none other than Chris.
The amazing Chris. Yeah, I was shouting him out yesterday.
Good.
So let's work also a little bit below here. So between the navel and the top of the pubic bone here, if you were to divide that distance in half, maybe you can do that with your fingers. Top of the pubic bone to the navel, divide that distance in half. Go a little bit down with your fingers, maybe half an inch, a little less than a centimeter. And then keep one finger there, and then divide that distance between your navel and that point. So this is all below your navel. These 2 points, Ren 6, Ren 4, this area, these are both very important for nourishing qi. And for many people, this is the primary space where they collect their energy during Qigong practice. And so today, let's spend a little time nourishing that area as well. Maybe let's just make some comfortable circles. And again, I know that for some people, depending on how their body is shaped right now, this might be a difficult area to reach. So simply do your best. Yeah, you're right, Del. Qi high, the C of Qi, that's Ren 6, this upper one. But again, it depends on who's saying it and when, because there's a lot of C's of Qi on the body. There are areas that are named C of Qi. There are other points called C of Qi. Yeah, it just depends on the system. And so, but in most of the acupuncture books that you'll find today that were sort of standardized by the Republic of China, this is called Qi Hai. Wonderful point. Very useful one to keep warm and nourished every day. This is one of my favorite ones for acupuncture, or more for moxibustion. And I've thought about doing a moxa class, but I'm afraid of people burning themselves at a distance and I can't be there to help them. Doing moxa on yourself every day is fantastically healing, as long as you have some kind of basic diagnosis by a doctor of Chinese medicine who says that, you're not going to dump a lot of yang qi into a system that can't absorb it. See above my last discussion 10 minutes ago. Pouring energy into a system isn't always the best option. Feels nice.
It does. That point was wonderful.
It's a great spot. Yeah. And especially during times of conception, that lower point that I was mentioning, Ren 4, and just a little bit below that, which is in line with the uterus, these are wonderful points just to keep warm. Especially if you find yourself as somebody who menstruates once in a while. At least a few of you that have that experience. So let's do a little work on the back. Make sure that you continue to rest your weight appropriately just in front of those sitting bones. Your body is straight, crown of the head is floating upward. This is an important space for the Ren Mai, this Ren vessel, to be able to settle. That space in the center of the perineum is a very important point in the body energetically. The gathering point for the yin channels in the body. It's called Hui Yin. It happens to be it's called Ren 1. It's the lower Ren point in the body. So this point at the top of the head here that we talked about and we start the class with, some people call this Hui Yang, the gathering of the yang. And this is Hui Yin, gathering of the yin in the perineum. And that is the base of the Ren vessel that we're working on. And so we release all the way through, top to bottom. One is released upward, one is released down, but only when we're in the appropriate position so that our body can soften. Eventually, masters like ZhiCheng, they can do whatever they want, and their body is appropriately soft and balanced, and crazy things happen, so they can sort of ignore the rules. But for the rest of us, we continue to use good posture, appropriate methods, so that our system can continue to change in the right direction. Remember to continue to soften your chest and your shoulders. Softening your belly. As we reach over toward in our body, it's very easy to begin to hold the chest as we lean forward or to collapse the chest as you push down. So please manage to keep this open and soft. Don't begin to obstruct all the work that you've been doing. Feels good. I like your gingerbread man socks.
Thank you.
Very fancy. Easing open the lower leg. Remember that the goal is to become soft and fluid. And so as you move, start to communicate with your body and get a sense of, oh, this place is holding tight. This place is needing this. That's why I'm tugging on the calf, because I know for many people, the calf just sticks to their bones and doesn't move. And so we release that away. But if that's not a thing for you, then maybe for you, you move this way, and that feels especially nurturing and opening for this area. Your awareness soaking into that fascial layer. Maybe for you, it's more the Achilles and the adhesions there. Or for the people that have shin splints, which is basically tearing of the lining that attaches to the fascia and through here. So we soften there. And you really want to emphasize the one that is most important for you. And so, spleen 6, just above here, very nourishing point. It doesn't technically relate to this Ren Mai, but it does have the same feel of this nourishing, very stabilizing, nurturing point. The point that does relate to the Ren Mai is this point below this ankle point, right here, the very top of the medial malleolus. If I travel down toward my foot, how do I do this way here? If I go downward toward my foot here, that point, I can soften and warm. Kidney 6. This is another point that relates to this conception vessel. And so if this is an area of particular interest to you, you can spend time nourishing and warming this point. But really, you should be warming this anyway as we soften and warm this whole space and reach to the foot. Kidney 6 point. Nourishing and warming, opening that space inside of the ankle. But just by doing this movement that we normally do for the liver point, the kidney point, and the spleen line, the top of my hand is already warming this point anyway. Just as part of our daily practice. There's all kinds of hidden, what do you say, like Qigong Easter eggs in this set. The people that put it together, Shifu and his teachers, they were very wise. Emphasizing for the sake of today, again, as we fold from the hips and continue to lengthen, that we keep the chest soft. And you can purposefully do it wrong. You can sort of shallowly pull down your chest and compress your belly as you do this. And it doesn't allow anything to move. Or you can soften, and this stays open. And so there's no compression in your belly. That's why you hear my breath be unaffected, because there's space still occurring in my abdomen. Are we getting more snow today?
I don't know.
Took me by surprise. Continuing to soften your belly, your breath, your chest. All of this releases. Remember the importance of allowing yourself to be human-shaped in this culture that is terrified of bellies. We had a very close friend recently who deals with a lot of body dysmorphia and other issues. They had a whole experience of recognizing that their belly is not perfectly flat or concave shaped. It looks like a completely normal human belly, but this person had a very strong emotional experience about it. And that's very common. This culture that we expect everyone to look and feel a certain way all the time. And part of nourishment, part of being kind to ourselves, is letting ourselves look and be how we actually are. And so that's a very important lesson. And so just with breath, as I say in a lot of my classes, you can either have a flat belly, maybe, or you can breathe, but you cannot do both. You can have a flat concave belly, or you can have comfortable, relaxed posture, but you cannot have both. You have to let your body be shaped how it is. And some people have a flat belly, and that's just how they're shaped, and that's fine. But a lot of that is genetics, or just how they happen to be living, or an age group. But please do be gentle with yourself, and let yourself soften your belly. Breathe. Wear clothing that lets you breathe. Surround yourself with people who are comfortable with you breathing and being you. And that is one of the ways that we heal, not just as individuals, but culturally, in relationships. We let each other be who and how we are. And I feel like that's a very important experience. So let's do one more, a movement of the mouth, the tongue, and the swallowing. As you swallow the saliva, perhaps you feel it sinking down along the front into that space just behind the navel. But a good portion of this is this awareness sinking down the ren, mai, and we allow that to happen. allowing your awareness to slowly expand to include the center, but also to include the rest of your body. And then grounded in the center to begin to include the space around you, so that the chi of your awareness expands out but remains grounded in your body. And we want to begin to shift this sense of our center. For most people, it's often up here in their head or sometimes outside of their body. And we want to begin to shift that sense of where we are located to being down here. This becomes the center of our movement, the center of the seat of our sense of self, so to speak, until eventually even that goes away. But we always should be settled in our body. That keeps our chi cultivating all the time. Thank you very much. If there's any questions, we can go through them.
All right, I see a question that relates to something you said earlier. I'm not sure what. It says, is that why Zhuang is bad if you don't have good foundations? It's like pouring yang qi into a system that's not ready for it. I ask because Zhuang builds up energy.
It does. Well, it can. So Zhuang is standing posture. And there's a lot of different standing postures. The way that most people use them and do them, especially martial artists, is they tend to try to pump their chi up. And they pump it up to their upper body, so they feel really energized. And it pumps it to the outside, so they feel really strong. And that's a thing that a lot of martial artists like the feeling of. Same thing happens when you go to the gym. You feel really strong, you get that pump. But remember that that's not necessarily good for the body. That it's often drawing resources from inside the body and pulling them to the outside. But good health starts on the inside. And that's, again, that phrase that in Chinese of the outside is strong, but the inside rots. And so oftentimes people will do these practices and they're pushing chi out very strongly. Wow, and they feel really good. And they say, oh my gosh, Qigong's amazing. But what they don't know is they're actually getting worse. And like you said, all of that yang qi, all of that warmth and heat and movement comes to the outside. And their digestion grows weaker, and their ability to be grounded grows weaker, and their sleep isn't very good, and their emotions are wild. But for a little while, they feel really good. And so we have to be careful that the practices we're doing are like that, and that people have the basics first, the basics of posture, the basics of the ability to relax. Otherwise, all they do is stand here and they get more and more tense, and they get worse and worse. The ability to ground, to understand what nurturing their health feels like, these are really important skills. Yeah. And so, and I started doing that stuff too early when I was studying with that master in New Zealand. He taught me bad habits that I've had to overcome. And so bit by bit, we learn. Oh, thanks, Steph. I'm really glad you came. Perfect day for you to come. And I'm really glad you're wearing your shirt. Steph is wearing the shirt that Patreon sent her, which is really wonderful. Steph's been a supporter for so long now that some good portion of the fact that I'm able to teach these classes at all comes because of Steph. And so we appreciate you, Steph. Thank you very much. Yay, Chris. I'm so glad that you came. You rock too. I can't sleep is something to do with the shen. So the shen is part of who we are. And that Dell asked the other day as well, that when we talk about the shen, it gets translated to spirit, which gets really messy because of how the Western culture has seized. It gets turned into soul, as in like a Christian soul. It turns into all these strange things, or it turns into spirit in the sense of like ghosts, which of course is not what it's referencing at all. In the case of Chinese medicine spirit, when we talk about shen disturbance, and again, this is what I talked about in, what was that, a couple classes ago? I'm not sure now. They all blend together. The quality of the spirit, in this case, the shen, is determined by the health of the qi and blood in the body. And so Yes, that's part of it. That the Shen is an experience in your body. So for instance, for anybody, if they get a really good night's sleep and they eat really well for a while, or the example that I gave is that if they went on retreat for a year at the monastery and were just very quiet, they got away from the news and stress and their job and things, and they just ate well, they walked around, they practiced a little Qigong, they slept deeply, they took 2 naps a day, until after a year or so, they're completely replenished, and they had that sense of deep refreshingness. And I imagine most people have had that experience at least once in their life. They can think back to a time when they just felt clear and good. They felt rested. They felt ready. Their mind was quiet, and so they could notice things. They were feeling peaceful and calm. That is what these monasteries and these places are for, to create that space. And it works. And so that quality of the mind, of being clear and open and fresh, not filled with thoughts, not bogged down by worries or obsessive loops and these things, that's a quality of Shen. That's the Shen that we often talk about in Chinese medicine that can be treated with sleep and food and things like that. And so don't get it mixed up when we talk about Shen in terms of like Qigong alchemy and Daoist practices and things, because that can be different. And other systems use the word kind of liberally, so you have to be careful. So I hope that answers your question. And because we could say that that's the experience of your mental world, this part of your world, because of sleep and things. But you could also easily start talking about your experience in the body. And you'd be like, oh, I'm also feeling really relaxed and my muscles feel really strong. And that would be an experience through our essence, the cultivation of our essence, or our chi flow and our emotional experience. And so these are the 3 treasures of our being, and the spirit, the qi, and the body. And so from this perspective, and so when we're talking about whether or not you can't sleep because of the Shen, it's those things can happen, of course, but it's usually more the other way around, that sleep nourishes the Shen. Some forms of Taoism talk about the worms and the corpses and things. Yeah, Chris, tell me if that makes sense to you after you listen to it a bit. If not, yeah, we can talk about it again. Maybe I can send you a message about it. But basically, don't worry about the idea of Shen disturbance like being an issue. It can be something that can be diagnosed in the sense that, in the way that fatigue can be diagnosed, or constipation can be diagnosed and treated. And so I can say, oh, the constipation is not allowing me to sleep at night. That would be a reasonable thing, because you feel stuck and it's painful or something like that. But often when we start using terms like Shen disturbance, spirit disturbance, there's the stigma attached to it. It's a label like, oh, there's something wrong with you. And so you don't want to go that direction. Instead, just recognize that the way we eat, the way we sleep, the way we move, the way we breathe, the way we think, it all interacts to create a human experience. And one of those functions can be talked about like being foggy or obsessive, or the mind is being disturbed because of the way we're living. And that can be treated with acupuncture, with sleep, with food, with herbs, with appropriate practices and things. And so think of it more that way, because I think the feeling I often get is that people misunderstand what it means. In the same way that like Dell's asking about the worms and these kinds of things, like malevolent spirits. And there are some systems of Taoism that believe that spirits are attacking us, ghosts are attacking us, these kinds of things. And there are other systems of Taoism that experience it more of just, these are aspects of our nature. Like how we have that mean voice inside most of us that says mean things to us all day long. Oh, you'll never be good enough. Oh, and most people have experienced that voice in some form or another. And so that's one of the worms, one of the malevolent spirits that gets talked about in Taoism. It's a way of anthropomorphizing this human experience. It creates something. It's the same reason that we often will talk about gods or other deities that are actually just references toward aspects of our own consciousness, our own experience, like unconditional love. We put that in the form over here of like a Guanyin figure in Buddhism. We say Guanyin is this unconditional loving character. Some people believe that there's a spirit wandering around named Guanyin, who's like a god or a goddess. And other people are like, well, this is a way of relating to it, because some people will say to themselves, I will never feel unconditional friendliness toward the world. I'm just too filled with anger and hate. But they can imagine a god or a goddess feeling like that. And so we put the little statue of Guanyin over here, and I look at it and I say, oh, all right, look, this is my statue of Goddess of Mercy over here. And I look at it and I say, well, I can't feel that way, but I can imagine how you would feel that way. And somehow by looking at this statue or this representation, I get kind of resonance with that. I can find how that could be possible when maybe I'm stuck in my own ideas of anger or rage or loss, but I can get a kind of reflected sense of unconditional love. And for some people, that's where they're at. And they need this sense of there's a thing over here that represents that, because it can't be me. And then as you improve in your practice from one particular Taoist perspective, because some people genuinely believe there's a person walking around out there who is this goddess example of love. The way that we practice is that as you learn, what you learn is actually that representation doesn't need to be out here, because it is part of all of our nature. And we learn how to find that inside ourselves. And then we don't need this anymore. Instead, it just becomes a representation of something that's in us. And so we look at it and we find in ourselves unconditional friendliness, love, this sense of kindness toward the world, these qualities of nurturing and lovingness that I believe are part of everybody. But for some people, they feel like it's impossible at different times in their life to find it. The reason I mention that as an example is because the worms and these various ideas are also part of that tradition, where we say there's this voice in my ear, it's mean, and how do I deal with it? Well, before I can accept that maybe it's just a part of myself, because that can be too difficult, it can be painful to think that I'm doing this to myself. So instead I say, well, it's this little spirit floating around over here, this goo, a not nice thing that's whispering in my ear. And so that helps me deal with it, because I can say, well, you're over there. And then over time, as we mature in our practice, we recognize that it's actually part of ourselves that also need to be harmonized and healed. And so in a way, we imbibe, we eat the worms. These kinds of terminology happens. The dragon and the tiger mate, the fire and the water combine. We use these metaphors to refer to our various aspects of our nature. They're not, we can anthropomorphize them all we want. And that can be a really helpful stage of our practice, until over the time we find that the universe is inside us. And we learn how to work with it. We learn how to find those aspects. So we become immortals. Not because we necessarily live forever, although there's people that believe that. I have hesitance around believing that kind of thing. But I can tell you that there is a part of us that can become free of that thing that dies all the time. There's an aspect of our nature which is always fresh, that people will say is unborn, this kind of terminology. Again, it's just metaphor, but it can be found inside us. And there are people that believe that it's not. I have yet to find a reason to think that there's a 1,000-year-old person walking around who's an exemplary of perfect love and who glows and meditates and floats. I think that's an example of something we can imagine. I've yet to come across an actual floating demon that speaks in my ear, except in my head. And when I resolved those issues in myself, which can be done, all of that stuff vanishes. And so some people will say, well, you healed yourself, therefore those things went away because you changed your vibration. So now they can't affect you anymore. That's one way of seeing it. Another way of seeing it is that it's all an experience on the inside that we can heal. But we use various levels of metaphor to understand our experience of being human. And sometimes that looks like gods or demons. Sometimes it looks like, tigers and dragons or waves. And we find how to work with it until we become whole. And that's the goal. That's unification of the Tao. That's becoming an immortal. And it's possible for everybody, in my opinion. Yeah, I have been around people my whole life that believe in demons, ghosts, spirits, these kinds of things. And if you listen to some of my things on Patreon, you'll hear about how I spent a lot of my life hunting for those kinds of things. I was writing a ghost story book at one point. I was living in a town called Sedona, which was next to a very famous ghost town called Jerome. And I was going around. This is when I was 19, I think, 20. And I had a book full of ghost stories collecting from people. I was ghost hunting. I was looking for these experiences. I've spent a lot of my life looking for these experiences to prove or disprove them to myself. And I don't disbelieve in anything, but I can tell you that from my experience, I don't have any reason to believe that they're real. Because when I healed myself, all of that stuff vanished. And so, again, some people will say that it vanished because they can no longer attack me because my vibration is so high. I've heard that kind of language, and that's a perspective that some people have. From my perspective, I healed those aspects of myself that were generating those experiences. So just to answer your question, no, I don't believe in demons attacking and things like that. More than a way of describing something that's happening inside us. And so I know that other people believe differently, and some percentage of the people watching this will, spout hate in the comment section or something, but that's my experience, and I just have no reason to believe anything else. The second it's a fun little town, and I spent a lot of time there. I helped to manage a store that was being opened there when I was a kid. When I was 18, I left Los Angeles and fled with a girlfriend to Sedona and ran a shop and did all these things and played my saxophone and got tuberculosis, all kinds of fun stuff. And hunting for ghosts was a big part of why I was there, trying to find out what was true about metaphysics and spirits and things like that. And all I can tell you is that I really looked, and Mel can tell you that I still really look. It's a whole discussion point, and even in this house. But the most that I have discovered is that by healing yourself, all of those things go away. And whatever that means, it ends up being the same. As people are like, how do I do exorcisms and things? And we've had those kinds of questions. And the best thing I can tell people is to heal themselves, and those problems go away. And so whatever context you choose to put that into, whether you become demon-proof, or you become free of that aspect of you that experiences demons. I don't know which one is true, but I can only tell you what my experience is. There are some wild experiences that happen in minds that are having wild experiences. And so whether or not, who knows what's true? I don't want to pretend that I can tell you like what the nature of reality is, only what my experience is. I always want to be honest about what my experience is, because I know a lot of people that believe in things that I have no reason to think are true. And when I go to test them, and I often go to test them, every time they have been proven to be untrue. And I'm skeptical and going, well, not one of these have proven to be true, and on and on and on that hunt went. Until now I'm left in this place where all I can do is tell you what has worked for me, what people tell me. And every time I look, I don't find it. And so People flying, people doing all these things. I have no reason to think it's true. And so I would love to be proven wrong. Sure, most things have roots in shamanism. I still feel like shamanism is about understanding the nature of ourselves and the world. That's what the mystic tradition is. I feel like then people write books or they get lost in the stories about those metaphors that we use to explain a love or a sense of self. But again, that's just my affinity. The guy I'm going to tomorrow is certainly a huge believer in Daoist spirituality and spirits and gods and demons and this kind of thing. And there's wonderful students of ZhiCheng who are very famous teachers of shamanism. And so, a lot of perspectives in the world. This is just mine. Mine is very simple. It is about learning how to be peaceful and calm and loving and gentle and healthy and present, learning to connect with the world and with the people around you, and learning how to engage with your body and learning how to cultivate deep health and a sense of well-being. And to me, beyond that, things are fun, but I'm not really interested in it because that's usually, I think, what people are looking for anyway. But other people are just hunting powers, they're hunting ghosts, or hunting this and that. And that's fine. That's certainly a thing in the world. They're looking for magic the way that I was. I wouldn't have wanted to listen to me as a kid because I wanted to go find those things. And so I encourage people to go look. The thing is that in my experience, at least, I've never found it. And so I settle further and further into this experience of the present moment, into simplicity and calm and peace and love and connection. And that becomes everything. And that's enough. And I'm really happy to be at this point in my life and to try to share that with people rather than trying to push ideas and ideals and things like that on people. Yeah. And I'll let you know if a demon walks up to me or if a ghost appears around or if I learn to glow and float. But for the most part, what I've learned is that there's this deep stillness at the center of everything. And in that deep stillness, like love is part of our sense of beingness. Peace and happiness, this quality is just part of what we are. And we share that beingness with everything. And recognizing that and resting in this moment without ideas, without places to go, without stuff to feel and like need and stuff, that deepens forever. And that is more than enough. All the details and the things that we chase up until then, I think, are often just pathways that we think will lead us there. But usually they're more like symptoms of the things that are going wrong in my experience. And so, again, I can't tell people what's true or what to think or believe, but this is just my experience because I always want to be totally open and clear with everybody. And that's where I am now. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to go eat food. I hope you have a wonderful day.